It is.
Are you recording, Sarah?
I believe so.
All right, so, Sarah, will you call the roll?
Yes, be happy to. We've got Judge, CJCC Chair, Judge Christina Meyer. We've got CJCC Vice Chair, Sheriff Bigd. We've got Supervisor Donald Jetson as Supervisor McCullough's designee for our meeting today, and hopefully for future meetings as well. We've got Judge Wagner with us. We've got Paula Winter, DHS Director. We have Chris King, Commander King, as a designee of Chief Hollister. We have Michelle Barrow with Department of Corrections. We've got Jonathan Lundeen, Public Defender. We've got Chief Greg Colossus on Zoom. We have Jamie Dardine with the Bridge and our citizen member. And we have KT Gallagher on Zoom. I think I called everybody. Oh, Josie La Liberty. Sorry, Josie. And you make us have a quorum, so thank you.
All right, so welcome comments, welcome everybody. And I think we're gonna get later into, didn't you have things on here, Sarah, about new people and who we were welcoming?
Yep, just want to take a minute to welcome both our chair and vice chair for 2-year terms. So this will be 25 to 26 for both Judge Meyer and for Sheriff Bigd. So I appreciate you taking up the challenge and the opportunity. We also have newer members joining us. So I mentioned Chief Colossus, he joined in the fall, but newer to us. From UW Stout. And then we have our new citizen member, Rod Smeltzer. He's not here today. Hopefully we'll see him next time around. And then
He had surgery on the 13th.
yeah, so he's probably recovering. So
I'm sure.
we'll give him a pass this time. And then, as I mentioned, we've got Chair McCullough's designee, Supervisor Jetson, joining us.
Welcome. Okay, so moving on. Has everyone looked at the minutes? And do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion passed. Sarah, is there a public comment?
No public comment.
CJCC overview?
Okay, and I'm going to be very brief because we have some guest speakers today, but just as kind of a table setting exercise, just thought we could briefly go over our mission vision. I see you guys are not seeing it on the screen, so I'm not quite sure why that is the case. Right. Share.
You know, there's been worse technical errors like the Super Bowl and those kind of things. And so I appreciate Sarah's technical errors.
All right, so just a little something on the screen to look at. So the mission of our CJCC is really to collaborate between our stakeholders to improve the effectiveness of our system, our criminal justice system. Newer to last year, we have a vision, and that is to really improve the system for all Dunn County residents. Structure, our council is made up of 22 members, voting members, and we have 2 standing committees. We have an executive standing committee, which is our leadership group, and then we have an operations committee. We tend to have those 2 committees meet at the same time, and those are monthly meetings. This large quarterly is a quarterly meeting, so once every 3 months for 4 times a year. And then we have different work groups or task groups depending on what we're working on and what we're taking up, and those are usually specific to an issue or task overall. Expectation is really that we're working together and we're collaborating, we're cooperating, we're trying to improve the system overall. For us to take any actions, we need that quorum, and that's why it's important for folks to show up if you can. Just a visual here on the executive operations and then the CJCC overall. And there's our 22 members. This is all in the bylaws, which you just recently received. And then we use the framework of evidence-based decision-making framework. So this is just a visual of the decision points on the criminal justice system, all the way from law enforcement through sentencing and violation response. So these are all the decision points in a way of really, this framework is a way of looking at the system. And I just wanted to show you how our different programs and processes fit into these decision points. We've got our law enforcement officers out there doing the law enforcement proxy. They're doing that risk screener to inform their decision to arrest. We've got our behavioral health officers out there doing deflection diversion work. We have pretrial services doing assessment and providing information to the court and DA, public defender. We have a pre-charge diversion program that's operated out of the district attorney's office. We have our treatment opportunity diversion program that is specific to substance use issues, but a diversion program. Moving down the pike there, we do have more intensive programming as you go further on. So that's our treatment court, family treatment court, more intensive programming. We have services in our jail to help with treatment and recovery. And then at the far end, we've got probation's evidence-based response to violations. And then we've got the programs that can be referred to as a response to probationers' behavior. So just wanted to kind of, we talk a lot about programs and grants at different times. So I just wanted to give folks a visual of how all that stuff fits in. So if there's no questions, that was my overview.
Thank you. We have Miss Stephanie Hilton here, who's going to talk to us about DNA collection and some DNA stuff. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I think it does, it sounds like it's on. So,
I think it's on you.
all right. And once Sarah gets the slides up, and I will apologize, I thought it was the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which a lot of counties use that, but honestly, I like collaborating a lot better. That's a better name for what you all are doing. And Judge, about 15 minutes, is that what you were?
So why don't you take what you need and then we'll see
Okay.
if people have questions or whatever.
Yeah, I want to make sure I have time for questions. So I've taken information that from presentations I've previously done and tried to just kind of take some of the highlights to give you all just a little bit of background, and then can talk about some potential solutions. And I just want to kind of from the start, I'm here in the spirit of like education and awareness. I'm not here to blame anybody for not doing their job. Like this so I was hired at DOJ almost 5 years ago to work on figuring out a way to identify who has not provided a DNA but is required by law to do so, and then to figure out a plan to collect these samples. It's not easy, and it takes multiple agencies. It's a statewide issue, but also a local issue. So I just want you to know that I'm here in kind of the spirit of like, let's work together and to try to do better. Also, if I've been working on this issue for almost 5 years, so if I'm saying something and it doesn't make sense, it's probably just because I've been living and breathing it. So please don't hesitate to, raise your hand or, raise your virtual hand online. I also try to not talk too fast. So please also let me know if I don't have a court reporter here telling me to not talk fast. So I will try to do what I can. This is just a disclaimer I have to put in every presentation because my position is funded by the federal Department of Justice. So it just says that my views are not necessarily their views. You can advance. So we're going to talk a little bit about the scope of this project. And you can go to the next slide. And while I did earlier just say I'm not here to blame anybody, and I'm certainly not here to shame anybody, but this is about education and awareness. So this map is people who have been identified by the Department of Justice as owing a DNA sample due to a qualifying conviction by county. And so that means anybody with a felony conviction going back to January 1st of 2000 forward through 2021, and then anybody with a misdemeanor conviction starting with offense dates of April 1st, 2015 through 2021. So this gives you an opportunity to look at kind of your number, which is current as of the end of December. We get these updates quarterly from the crime lab. So, 235 for the county, which is, it's not, it's a decent amount to have to tackle, but it sounds like y'all are interested in doing that, or I hope so. But other counties certainly have bigger numbers, as you can see by looking at the slides. So you're not the worst. Okay. So for this project, it was what we did at DOJ, and this was like through a multidisciplinary team where we got all the different subject matter experts together to figure out, okay, how can we're going to identify people who owe DNA, how do we communicate who does? So what, between the crime lab and CIB, what we have is anybody who's been identified through our project as needing to provide a DNA sample. If their criminal history is run, there's this flag, and it looks like the picture on the screen that indicates that the collection has been missed and it needs to be collected. Kind of the downside of this living in criminal history is that, when an officer is out doing a routine traffic stop, they're not necessarily running criminal history, so that this flag isn't necessarily popping up. But the information is there, if somebody's criminal history is run. So everybody on our list that is included on that, on that map, they have this designation in criminal history. And once the crime lab processes that sample, then that flag is turned off and it says DNA on file. Currently, the crime lab they just added people with 2022 convictions. Those people that have been missed now have flags, and they're working on 2023. It's not completely a perfect system, but it's better than what we had before. So next slide. This is just an overview of the DNA collection laws. And I believe Sarah's going to email this presentation out to you all afterwards. So you'll have it just as a reference. Even though the project only includes misdemeanor and felony convictions, Wisconsin is an arrest DNA state for violent crimes. We're one of 2 states that requires DNA upon arrest for certain crimes. So I just wanted to have that statute in there. And then for juveniles, there is DNA collection requirement, but this project did not tackle that. Next slide. So this is to kind of represent that it was really actually kind of difficult to figure out a way not only to identify who owes DNA, but there's data coming in from all different sources, and none of those data sources were perfect because none of these systems were actually built to track whether or not people have provided a DNA sample. So you have CCAP data. Well, that CCAP data has to attach to an arrest event in criminal history. And if there's no arrest event, so let's say somebody doesn't get booked in, then the CCAP data has nothing to attach to, which is something I had no idea about until I started with this project. So you have potentially, even though we've done a pretty good job of, I think our list is fairly comprehensive, we know we're missing people because, not just because of COVID, but sometimes people don't get booked in and there's never then anything for the CCAP data to attach to in criminal history. So it's not a perfect system. Also, before this project was started, there was a DNA needed flag in criminal history on people that the Department of Corrections had identified as owing a sample. And the Department of Corrections, they have their SAFE team. It's the Sex Offender and Felony Apprehension Team. I think I'm getting that acronym right. And so they work on tracking down sex offenders and also anybody who needs to provide a sample that was in prison or on supervision. That's who they focus on. They also can be very helpful with out-of-state collection. So they are a part of our multidisciplinary team and kind of helped us get going as we were working on this project. So anyway, data from multiple sources, none of them are perfect. And it also, that doesn't include your local data either, which is a different data source. So that's why kind of this problem is complicated because we have statewide data and then also local data. Next slide. So initially, when we started this project in 2020, we identified about 13,500 folks or that owed a DNA sample. And then if you can advance it one more, I think one more after that, sorry. Then when we added the 2021 convictions a little bit further into the project, we got up to about 15,000 people statewide. Next slide. So this is briefly our project's progress. So first of all, this data is from 2023, so it's just over a year old. We had multiple grants, different sexual assault kit initiative grants that were funding this project, and they all had different requirements. So the requirement that had the crime lab crunching this data, that was in a different grant that has since expired. So that's why we only have this data, because it actually takes some manual tracking to figure out, okay, of these samples that we identified in the project, which ones actually led to a CODIS hit or an investigative lead. So, but we know with about 3,500 samples collected that we got about 50 investigative leads out of that, which I think is pretty significant. And just for your, we'll go to the next slide. And this is kind of how it breaks down. So high priority crimes are homicides, attempted homicide, and sexual assaults. And I think that's, I mean, I'm a sexual assault prosecutor, so I mean, I tend to gravitate towards, I think, you know, those can be sometimes stranger cases, but certainly crimes that have a huge impact on the victims and their families. So about a third of these samples linked to those types of crimes, and 6 or 7 of those were to an unknown suspect. So these, you know, collecting these samples can be very valuable investigative tools, but also they're clearly solving a lot of property crimes and other, you know, felonies. Next slide. And this is some data that, so we have a very small team in the criminal litigation unit at DOJ. It's myself, another prosecutor, and then a paralegal. And so my paralegal, Ashley, has learned a lot about data and analysis. And so she crunched some numbers, so we had a little bit more, just a visualization of our project's progress. So this just kind of shows kind of over multiple years, based on the number of samples collected, kind of where we started and then where we are at. We're over 5,000 as of the end of the year. And then I'm kind of here because of Monroe County. So Judge Radcliffe early on got interested in this issue and connected with me, and he became an early champion of trying to figure out how to solve this DNA collection problem and solve it from a multidisciplinary approach at the local level. So I'm going to have a few slides about what Monroe County did. So he pulled together a team across the departments at the county level, and they first did what any task force type group does, is you want to identify the problem. And so they identified kind of like 5 key problems that were leading to their, you know, missed collections at the local level. Next. This is just kind of helps kind of break down with collecting DNA. Sometimes you can collect a DNA sample, but if the fingerprints are bad, or if, you know, maybe something wasn't entered right on the CCAP side of things, like there's a lot of multiple things that could go wrong. That then means even when that sample was collected, it can't get processed by the crime lab. So that's on the red, the no side, and then the green side, that's like all the things that kind of need to happen to make sure that a DNA swab can be properly processed. And again, these are, I included some of these because I think it's helpful, you know, maybe when you're reflecting later or trying to tackle this issue later, then you can kind of use these as resources. Next slide. This was what, after they addressed kind of what are the problems, this is what Monroe County put together with steps to resolve the problem. You know, they noticed that making sure that people got booked in, either, you know, on that initial appearance, or they would issue a warrant. So within 90 days of that initial appearance, making people attend in person for plea hearings. I know there's a lot of, you know, virtual court during Zoom, but, you know, things are different now. And that was just a policy decision that they made as a county, making sure the booking is completed immediately after conviction if it isn't done before. They are also collecting DNA in their courtrooms. And so every courtroom has DNA collection kits and somebody that can collect it. And then what they've also done is they have collection kits at every like police station in the county. So no matter where you're at, there's one that's going to be decently close to you if you want to provide your sample. Next slide. It's just some of the lessons that they learned in working through the problems and identifying their solutions. You know, number one is that it's not just one department or one agency's problem. Like everybody's got to work together. You know, tracking your DNA collection at the local level is really important. They use their in-house RMS, which they have Zerker. I don't know if you guys are on Spillman or one of the other ones, but regardless, I think of what one you have, there is a way to probably utilize it for tracking purposes. They want to just make sure they had one system at the local level to track the DNA. And they just recognize that like CCAP doesn't track DNA orders or collections. Like CCAP is a case management system, right? And that they needed to have more training across disciplines on this issue. Next slide, yeah, thank you. So let's talk a little bit briefly about different strategies. And I'm just gonna kind of like do an overview. And if you have more questions, later I can go into more details because I've been traveling around the state. And so I'm kind of collecting ideas as I go. People are trying out things. I'll tell you a moment about Wapaka, which is where I'm going there on Tuesday, and we're trying to kind of an experiment there. So if you can kind of just click through. So few different options. Oh, sorry. The love note there. What we did at DOJ is we initially did at least one letter went out to every Wisconsin resident from DOJ that was on the list. Some of the people got multiple letters. We tried if we got a letter returned, we tried it again. So we kind of did that. That's how we got those, well, essentially now about a little over 5,000 people to have provided their sample. And then we just directed them to go to their local sheriff's office to provide that sample. So the letters do definitely work to get some voluntary compliance. We've had counties that have utilized, phone calls and are trying out, knocking and swabbing at the door, which depending on your agency, it's something you may or may not want to do. Racine County, who had the most missed samples in the state and still do, they've been trying out different tactics and they've been setting out their civil process folks to try to do some knock and swabs. And a couple weeks ago, they did 7, I don't know if it was in 1 day or 2 days, and they got 5 out of the 7 people to provide their sample. So it was a pretty, it's kind of hard to you have an officer who shows up on somebody's doorstep. I don't know, probably people are inclined to say yes. But clearly a couple of people did not. So there's a lot of different approaches and certain strategies might be better at, for your county. When kind of voluntary compliance doesn't work, there are some options that are in the statute that it's nice to have. Not every state has these different levers that can be pulled. So civil petitions are something that can be utilized, but they require personal service. So that's a resource issue. Criminal complaints can be, but obviously they have a burden of proof and have to show that somebody intentionally failed to provide their sample. Also, what Monroe County has been doing is they've been, the judges, if somebody doesn't provide their sample to the sheriff's office within a certain number of days, the judges send out a warning letter. And then when they don't respond by the date on that warning letter, then the judges are issuing bench warrants. So it's kind of a nice way. You're not opening up a new case on CCAP and you're utilizing, the judge's existing power to try to get people to comply with the law. So I'm going to be in Wapaka on Tuesday. When I went up there and I met with them, they were very excited to work on this. And they were like, hey, we'll serve civil petitions if you want to do that. So we filed 101 civil petitions and they've been working on serving. And so far of the petitions served, over 80% of the people have already provided their sample. So it'll be interesting to see who shows up. This is kind of just a summary slide of the different tools that we have to work on this issue. And again, we're pretty lucky in Wisconsin that we have such robust and holistic law with respect to DNA collection. You can go to the next one. And this was a slide that Monroe County had put together, kind of their best practices for DNA collection. They found it really helpful to have a countywide task force. you don't necessarily have to create a special task force. I mean, you all already have a countywide group through this group. But maybe it's it's a subcommittee or something. They work on the booking process, making sure it's done early, collecting DNA at the courthouse right after conviction. Make sure staff are trained. They want to try to minimize the backlog, and they're developing that, local mechanism to track DNA collection. So it's kind of a twofold problem, right? You have we have the backlog, right? And then you have what's the local process and where are the gaps which kind of cause the backlog. And I think some counties are tackling the backlog and then the systematic issue, or you can do it the other way around. It's just whatever fits best for your county. The next one. So I just kind of put these together. It's kind of like a little sort of a checklist. So you can kind of remind yourself of what things can we do to, improve the local process. I think just getting like a marker to paper and figuring out what does our process look like right now, right? And you identify those ways, you work together and kind of develop some goals, and then getting that data from state and local sources to help drive your goal setting, I guess. And then the next one, this is focused on like collecting those DNA samples. So you can utilize letters, you can do, law enforcement outreach, you can, work with the DA's office for filing civil petitions or criminal complaints, depending on kind of the approach to that. I will note that civil petitions only work for people that live in Wisconsin. So anybody that's out of state, the only litigation tool really available is a criminal complaint or, the judge issuing a bench warrant, which, yeah, those are just the two options for the out-of-state folks. And just looking at your guys' list, it's a lot of Minnesota people on it, not surprisingly, I'm sure. And I do have copies. I did bring paper copies of your list in case that was helpful for discussion purposes, just in case. You can go to the next slide. This is something that can be done every year. Just like, taxes, we complete our tax returns every year. But the DNA data bank, which is one of the, units within the crime lab, you can, the sheriff's office can request a list of the missed DNA samples. The only downside of this list is it only has the SID, the person's, first and last name, county of conviction, and the case. Whereas the information we have at DOJ, we have all of that plus their most recent address, the offense. So we have a lot more information, but at least this was something you can do every year regardless. I didn't mention that this project ends in September. So I'm kind of part of my work is I'm trying to get local folks interested to kind of keep this work going, even though the SACI funding ends in September. So, and this is a way to get your kind of a copy of your list every year and see how you're doing. But we'll keep tracking it at least for the next 6 months, probably. This is my dog, Darwin. He get a feature in our presentation, but we just hope that by working together, we can get all of these swabs and, provide law enforcement with some additional investigative tools. The crime lab says 2 to 3% of these samples will lead to some type of a CODIS hit or investigative lead. So, that's for every 100 you collect, we could potentially solve 2 to 3 cases. So pretty good return on your investment considering genetic genealogy and all those other things can be time intensive and very expensive. So that is just kind of hopefully enough background to kind of paint a picture of this problem. And I'm happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, I have some paper copies of the Dunn County list, if people are interested in that. It doesn't have all the information that is contained in the electric file that we can send out to those who, usually it's the sheriff's and DA's offices that are generally utilizing it, but certainly the courts as well. So yeah.
Marshall, do you want to come up and use a microphone?
This is a quick question. I requested a copy and list, and all I saw on mine was the SID number.
That's all you got?
Yeah, so if I can get a
Oh.
copy of the name.
Yes, we can do that. But the data bank only sent you the SID numbers.
Unless I'm opening it. Yeah, that's all it's.
Okay, well, I will also ask them about that too.
Does anybody online have any questions?
So Sheriff, somebody from your office must have been in our presentation last week. Were you there? Okay. Oh, yes. So yeah, I will ask the data bank about that. But otherwise, like, yes, we can get you, the DOJ list, which will have, a lot more information. And our paralegal and an intern, checked everybody's address. So it's inaccurate, which is, doesn't have it's not a foolproof system, but it has pretty good information. And I know sometimes you guys have better information locally because you might have maybe more contacts or people from some of maybe the frequent flyers, but at least it's more up to date than the data was originally.
So I put this on the agenda because I thought that this was a good project for the CJCC to deal with, because the key characters that would be working on our process, which is what I think we need to deal with first, the key characters are part of our CJCC. The sheriff, the district attorney, the judges, the clerk of courts, all of those people are part of the problem. Not necessarily a part of the problem, they part of the processes that would happen. And so, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
No one has any questions? I had a ton of questions when
I've got questions too, but we can ask.
I can also stay after too, or we can certainly have follow-up conversations if there's just a few people that, we could do like a Teams or Zoom or.
Yeah, because even if we take this on and there's additional questions, then we can ask them as well.
Yeah, and that's a lot of information and then you'll pass along the slides so people can kind of like think about it. But yeah, I'm happy to be a resource. That's how I was with Monroe County their subject matter expert, and they called on me from time to time and it's turned out well they've done a great job in their county working on this issue.
Next on our list is Crime Prevention Board Overview.
Hopefully everybody was able to review the overview worksheet that I'd sent to Sarah for the meeting. Essentially, what I'm requesting is that the oversight of the Crime Prevention Funding Board and its assets be taken over by CJCC because that is the process in quite a few other counties. And to me, it appears the best place within the county administration to handle it and understand its purpose. I guess if anybody has any questions about the funding board, its purpose, I can answer them.
How much time do you think that'll take us over the course of a year to oversee this board?
I would think not too many hours. I can assist in setting up the process for soliciting grants from it. That can be done just basically on a website. Submissions can come through the website. You give them a time period to complete it. The needs that the board has to have to basically review requests. And I think the most would be just once those grant requests, which I don't see many because it is written so narrowly to those that can apply. I could just see a couple as basically once they come is reviewing them, granting them, and the grantees are required to do reporting on how it's distributed. And then the board also has to keep some record of where it goes. So I don't see a whole lot of time because of the limited number of grant requests. And then again, if it's only granted to one or two agencies, the reporting should be minimal.
And so you'd like us to do it because it puts a buffer between the sheriff's department and the grantees so that there isn't any accusations of conflict of interest.
Correct, because At this point, being liaison for the Crime Stoppers program, I would anticipate, that's basically what this law was written for, is to assist state Crime Stoppers organizations. So being that, along with it, Crime Stoppers is a community-based program, but being as a sheriff's office and law enforcement benefits from it, there should be that buffer between the grant requests and those who grant it.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions? Is there a motion for the CJCC to overview the Crime Prevention Board?
I so move that the CJCC over the oversight of the Crime Prevention Board.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any objections? That's passed. We did not talk about the next step for that DNA collection. I think our next step is to form a subcommittee. Sarah, do we need a motion on that?
If we want it to be part of our goals for 2025, I would appreciate a motion on that.
Is there a motion to form a subcommittee for mapping out the DNA collection? Is there a second? I appreciate it. Is there any discussion regarding this issue? I would also like to note, and it's not on the agenda and it probably should be, that's probably my error. When we map out the DNA collection, there's also an issue regarding warrant funds. So the sheriff's department is, if there's a warrant and the sheriff's department is going to pick up the person, then the sheriff's department should be getting, there should be a $50 fee, is that right? 55? A $50 fee that should be ordered at the time. And that $50 fee is not being ordered on a regular basis. And so if we're already mapping out the DNA collection, we could at the same time figure out how we can do a process for those warrants as well, so that we get collection of those warrant fees. And so my question would be, is there a motion to have a subcommittee deal with the warrant fees as well?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion about that issue? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is passed. Sarah, the next thing on our agenda is considering consideration for actions to be taken by the council, goals for 2025.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Last time. And talk about goals here. DNA collection, we did that, crime prevention. Okay, so just to recap our 2024 goals, it was to implement our law enforcement deflection diversion initiatives. It was continue professional development of the CJCC, expand our family treatment court with a federal grant, and then to sustain our medication-assisted treatment. So at this point, as we're moving ahead for 2025, really looking for the goals to really continue our grant-funded programs and meet all the expectations as far as the outcomes and goals. New this year, we have additional funding coming in from the city for law enforcement deflection. We got a secondary grant for the CJCC for law enforcement deflection. So we've got a lot of this collaboration, coordination to be done with those two programs. So we're hoping to continue that. We're hoping to continue the treatment and jail services with the therapeutic community getting started. that continuation of medication-assisted treatment and looking to bolster the reentry portion where folks get more planning, more support, and support post-release of some sort of peer support. Then we're also looking through our grants that we have received a treatment court enhancement grant. That is a new grant for 2025, so we're looking to fulfill that. And then to continue our family treatment court enhancements. So we're really looking to continue all of our grant activities, plus add on the DNA collection, the warrant view process, and then assume the responsibilities or oversight of the Crime Prevention Board.
Do you need a motion, Sarah,
Sure.
to approve those goals?
Yes.
Okay. Is there,
We have them in pieces, so we could just,
So we-
really, I think it's just that A is all we need a motion for. Or if somebody wanted to do all three of them for the year, that's fine.
okay, so the goals are up on the screen. There's 3 goals, and do we have a motion to approve those 3 goals for the CJCC?
I'll move all 3.
Is there any discussion regarding these issues? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passed. Sarah, do you have a staff report and grant update?
Staff report was written in the packet along with some additional detail on all the 7 grants and donations that we have. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but just thought something in writing could be helpful.
Anyone have any questions for Sarah regarding the staff report? Sarah, what about the grants update? Do you have any thing you want to talk about that's an update, or what's written is that your full report?
Yep, it is in the full report, and additional details on those grants is in the package.
Okay. I always get this one wrong. Agency updates. We're the agency, right?
Yeah, everybody except for me talks now.
Everybody
I'm
except,
the staff. You guys are the agencies.
anybody have anything they'd like to talk about? I'd like to say, considering all the technical issues, that we started well after 4 o'clock, and look at it, it's 5 till. So, anybody online have any issues they'd like to discuss?
Some head shakes, no.
Head shaking, no. All right, I'm glad we had a quorum today. Sarah, is there the next meeting? So everybody does not come to the Executive and Operations Committee.
That is correct.
Everybody comes to the quarterly meetings.
Yes.
And so for those of you that are not on the Executive and Operations committees, the next meeting is May 15th. The rest of us who are on those committees come on March 5th.
Yes.
All right. So we'll see you then. Does everybody wish to adjourn? Yes? All right. Sheriff moved. I think that's good enough. So we'll adjourn. Thank you for attending.
Right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Well, we can